Hello QRS, Mr. A here with a game that was just played this afternoon actually. This is recorded on Sunday, January 22nd by one of my students. They played this on chess.com and I wanted to show it to you because it was really well played and there's a lot to learn here. Please do not worry about whatever level you're at school. I don't care, first grade, second grade, beginner through advanced. We're going to send you stuff every week after class that'll definitely help you on your way, okay? So anyway, this is the end of the game. White's last move, his first name is Andrew. I'll leave it at that. Andrew had just played rook to e7 and black resigned. They gave up. And the reason they gave up is because out of all of the legal moves that black has, they could play any single move. There really is no way to stop checkmate. You know, for example, if you were to take this bishop and put it on this beautiful diagonal, unfortunately, the queen is just going to take the pawn and you're checkmated, okay? So let's see how these players got there. I'm going to keep this video pretty short and kind of run through the opening quickly. So as you saw already, Andrew has the white pieces. And he plays what's known as a Ruy Lopez. You don't need to know the names of these openings to enjoy this video. And now they get into something called a four knights game. And this is symmetrical. And I think certainly the older kids would know what that means. That, you know, both players have pawns on the E file. All the knights are out on the same squares. And they continue to copy for a couple of more moves. And it's in this position where Andrew decides to change the pawn structure. Okay, so that word structure is something you're going to hear a lot, especially when you're studying chess. And when you're on the board, the word structure basically means the shape of your pawns. So here's what I mean. He takes the knight. And now his opponent, I actually don't know the opponent's real name. The username had the word gear in it. I don't know if it was the gear for a bicycle or a car. So I'm just going to call this player Gary for G. I'm totally making this up. So Gary takes with the D pawn, which is a very common way to capture in the opening of the game because it lets out your light squared bishop. Okay? And Andrew decides to take the pawn in the middle. Now, normally when you steal a pawn in the middle of the board and that opens a line to one of your pawns, your opponent can usually get it back. And Gary had a chance to do that the following way. First, he played rook e8, attacking the knight. And Andrew played a really good move. He protected the knight with pawn to d4, and that lets out his dark squared bishop. And now, in order to win the pawn back, Gary has to get rid of this knight, because you can see that the knight is protecting the pawn. So he does that by simply taking the knight. And this has actually all been played before at the master level. It's a pretty common position. So naturally he takes the piece back and Gary gets the pawn. So if you do the math here, you'll see that the positions are identical in terms of points. Each player has 7 pawns, 2 minor pieces. Minor pieces are knights and bishops, a pair of rooks, and of course the queens. So, what makes one position different than the other if it's not points? Well, if you want to pause your video, you can try to figure this out for yourself. Like, what are the differences between the two positions? Each team has a knight on the E file, but that's not really different. How about the bishops? You see that Andrew's bishop works on dark squares. Oh, look at that diagonal. That's pretty good thing this is not an art class. That was pretty bad. That's a little bit better. And then if you look at the light square diagonal for black, the bishops are fighting on opposite colors. Also, the pawn structure is different. There's a pawn here, separated. This is known as an isolated pawn. These pawns that are together, the two C pawns are doubled. Whenever pawns are linked together by letters, you see how the letters C and D are connected? That's called a pawn island. This is a tiny little island down here, and then you have 3 pawns on this side, which would be considered an island. So if an advanced class asked, how many pawn islands does white have? The answer would be 3. And how about black? Okay, just pause your video, and you'll see that the answer is 2. I can turn the board around for you. And advanced chess players, when they're in the middle of the game and they're trying to figure out what to do, one thing is to compare the differences between the two positions. And those are called imbalances. I'm actually going to cover a lot of this stuff in class, including the first and second grade group, because it doesn't take long for all of us to realize that your age doesn't really matter in chess. Everybody picks up the game quickly. Okay, so let's go back and take a peek of how this continued. So it's Andrew's turn. So he took his rook and he put it on E1, and he kind of ignored the fact that Gary can simply steal the pawn on C3, which he took. And the reason Andrew played this move is, one, he wanted to put his rook on this open file. Now, you heard me use the word file. Those are simply the letter lines in the chess game, and I called it open. And some players who hear that, they may look at this and go, hey, Mr. A, the file's not open. There's a knight on it. But remember, this knight can move at any time. And when it does move, you're going to see that the rook on E1 is really, really powerful. As a matter of fact, that's one of the main reasons that Andrew wins this game. Now, let's go back to why he gave up the pawn. He did it because he wanted to follow up with the move Queen F3, which is a very crafty move. It's a double attack. The queen is attacking the undefended F7 pawn. Now, when I say undefended, you could argue that the king here is protecting the pawn. That's true, but the pawn is attacked twice. It's attacked by the queen and the knight. And at the same time, the queen is attacking the knight on C3, which is really undefended. There's nobody in sight. Now, there was a way out of this for Gary. And I would ask you to pause your videos. And this is really advanced. So if you were playing the black pieces and you realized you were getting attacked in 2 spots, would you find a way to wiggle out of this? You can pause your video and try. Well, the answer would have been to play the move F6, which is a counterattack. What is black saying? Hey, no problem. You want to take my knight? Go right ahead. You can just take it. But then I'm going to take your knight. That's equal. And if you decide to take the pawn, well, if I do my math now, it appears that black's got a pawn back and white gets a pawn back. You know, they just traded the pawns, one on C3 and then one over here on E5, and all of a sudden the game is equal again. And that would have worked out, but unfortunately, Gary missed it. So again, you have 2 problems to solve. Well, sometimes when that happens, you have to get really creative. And the move pawn F6 would have done the trick. Okay, instead, from this position, black made a huge mistake. And I'm going to turn the board around for the last time. Let your eyes refocus. And black simply said, okay, if I'm going to lose something, I don't mind losing a pawn. That's much better than losing the knight. But in this particular position, because of a little trick, it turns out not to be the case. The queen took the pawn check. The king only has 1 move. And here is where we're going to see how powerful the rook on E1 is. Can anybody spot the trick that Andrew played? Stop your video. All right, I'm going to assume you stopped your video and you found this awesome knight to g6 check. Beautiful move. The only way out of the check is you have to give up or take the knight with the pawn, but don't forget this rook was opened after the check from the knight. So Andrew simply takes check, and that's going to win the queen, because if you just move the king, he takes the queen for nothing, so you might as well take. Queen takes, king up, and then a really, really nice move. You'll notice that this bishop on c8 cannot move, because if it moves, the queen is going to take the rook in the corner. That would not be good. So what Andrew did is he said, okay, my opponent's not going to move this bishop. What I'm going to do is play bishop to g5, leave my queen here pinning this bishop, and that move opens up the path for my rook to get into the game. And what he's going to try to do is get this rook to this line. Could you imagine a rook on this square? Well, that would be checkmate. Okay, so how did it happen? Black has to do something. So he played pawn to b6. His idea would be to put the bishop here and get the rook out. You see how the rook is attacking the queen? But the problem with this move b6 is Andrew just snaps off that pawn. Again, we show a double attack. Well, who do you want to lose? The rook or the knight? Well, Gary decided to save the rook. Off goes the knight. Bishop to b7, attacking the queen. Queen goes to f7, attacking the pawn. And Andrew, having done this, has really put this rook in a tough spot. You really can't come to any of these squares. You could come here, and actually this might not have been so bad, but I think Black felt, oh man, I can't really move anything, so he just moved a pawn. Well, you know the plan. We want to get this rook here. So what do? Rook e1, another pawn move, the rook lifted, and Gary said, okay, I know what you're doing, man. You're coming here and you're going to come to checkmate me. I'm going to move my bishop and stop that idea. But unfortunately, as soon as the bishop came to this square, in comes rook to e7, no protection of the g-pawn. Okay, so I hope you enjoyed the game. If there's any word that you heard or a term, you could always write it down, bring it into class. I'm going to be making a video every week for the school, so there'll be plenty to learn and to share in class. Really, really looking forward to seeing everybody this week. It's going to be an amazing session. Thanks so much.